Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to round 3 of the Simufur Silver Championship. Today we're at the Nurburgring, and as you can see, it is pretty moist on track at the moment. We're just getting knuckled down into free practice here, with Kestrel just leading the way with the first kind of laps, even though no times have been set yet. Uh, we're looking at, well, it's a hard one to kind of understand at the moment because there has been an update in between the last two races, the last race. So the tires are a little different this time around, a little less graining expected. So we're looking like the fries are going to be even stronger now with the update on the tires. However, it is wet. It's a little bit of an unknown with these new cars in wet conditions. So yeah, I'm currently on my own at the moment. We are waiting, hopefully, for Plasma to join, but he seems to be a bit AWOL at the moment. He's probably either sleeping or off somewhere being a massive furry. So I'll not speak too much during practice, so I'll just let you kind of follow the cars and see what's going on. So we're currently looking like a pretty healthy grid this time around. We're 16 cars so far deep, and Deeds currently is leading the way with 245, just a couple of hundreds ahead of Suzuka. Yeah, it's quite close at the moment. Looks like the Porsche maybe a little bit better this time around, with leading up there in third, just 1/10 behind Suzuka. At the moment, we're expecting it to rain pretty much the whole race. Hopefully, though, we do get a little bit of difference in strategy. Maybe it gets a little bit damp towards the end, or maybe it starts a little bit damp. We can just kind of hope for a bit more excitement than just a wet race altogether. But it's a bit of an unknown again. Like I said, we don't know what these cars are going to perform like. It looks like the Porsche, obviously putting that superior traction it could use in the rain, could be a bit of an upset that kind of way. We do expect we do have indeed Danak, and we came in and left a little bit, so yeah, I'm just trying to see if anyone's kind of massively improving on their times. Rochelle is currently leading the way with 234 to 3/10 ahead of Dipping Sauce pretty much. Lexus again is another car that's going to be good in the wet. It's always been a good car in the wet, so let's play towards its strengths this time around. Yeah, we might be looking a little bit of a change of the guard here with the Porsche and the Lexus overtaking the Ferrari by the looks of it. But of course, this is just practice, so not everything can be taken at face value. As we're running about 2 minutes left of practice. And we'll get straight into qualifying and see what we can go off from there. Yeah, no problem. Yep, so as we draw to a close practice, we shall lead with a 2:02.7. Nice improvement there from a 2:03.4 beforehand. Deeds is 0.7 back with dipping sauce. Again, 7/10 back. Just a little bit behind. LPR Paula, this is her second race. 1 second back. And Luna rounds into top 5 again, another second back. So the Porsche is looking strong this time around, with the Mercedes showing a little bit of strength there as well. And we're at the start of qualifying here. We'll hop on board with Castrol and follow him around for the lap. Weather still seems to be pretty solid. Just seems to be holding up as medium rain there. Plenty of water on track. No big puddles though, so should be easy enough for the drivers to navigate without too much issues. As we're just on our right laps at the moment, so nothing exciting happening times-wise. But Kestrel will be our first to set a time lap as long as they don't invalidate it. So it looks like we do have 16 drivers in total. So that's a pretty healthy grid for the silver guys. A little bit more than last round at Suzuka. Which is quite surprising because not everyone likes the wet, and usually find the wet rounds are a little bit quieter than the dry rounds. But yeah, it seems like the guys are willing to put in the effort here and go for a good race. As we're coming up following Kestrel here, just about to start a time lap coming through the Vidal chicane and about to cross the start finish line to start their time lap. Nice exit out of the Vidal, or sorry, the Coca-Cola curve there, flat out down to turn 1, the Castrol S, the call. Don't like the Nurburgring track corners because they're all sponsored and named after companies, but nice straight line here on the hard brakes. Nice turn in, a little bit lazy on the turn in there for Kestrel as we head into the Mercedes arena. Again, nice, kind of just a little bit slippy looking here, hard on the brakes again. Get it tight. You might want to stay off the curbs this kind of weather as we see a bit of puddles there across the track. So yeah, down to the Ford curve off the RTL straight. This is a strange one, it's kind of negative camber, but it kind of goes wide and then back in again. We want to sacrifice the entry into this turn, get a nice exit, stay off the curb again in the wet, down to the Dunlop curve. This is a strange one as well, you have to kind of straight line it towards the apex, and then down into the cambered corner again. Try and get on the curve as early as possible, up towards the Michael Schumacher S. Nice high speed, in the wet you'll be lifting, in the dry probably just a little tiny half lift in the dry, but in the wet you want to obviously keep that car on track. Into the Kumo curve here, stay off the AstroTurf on the outside, probably wisely staying off the curves on entry and staying kind of tight to the pit curve. Down to Hatzenbach's here, turn 13. Flat out, no lifting, all the way up to Vidal chicane again, turn 14, 15. Plenty of curb into this one. Yep, and a nice bounce over the curb there into the Coca-Cola curve for a little bit understeer there, a little bit too early on turn in. As we head towards our first time lap, which turns out to be a 2:04.2, which isn't as quick as Denak, who just beats it with a 2:03.1. And Dipping Sauce again just beats that with a 2:29. And swiftly beaten by Anka in a 2:28. So times are tumbling pretty fast here. I think once we see the Porsches get their tires up to temperature, we'll probably see them jump up as we do. Wushel does a 2:20, so 8/10 faster than Anka.
Yeah, the boat asserting its dominance, and there the Lexus sneaking in the top time. I think you're going to see a few of these cars, though, getting stronger times as these laps go on, and naturally the cars coming out later are going to get a little bit of an advantage, if you ask me, with some of the water getting kicked up and cleaning up the line a little bit. So might see a little bit of evolution going on to these laps.
Actually looks like it's maybe getting a little bit wetter because they're starting to get some streams going across the track there, so maybe the times aren't going to improve. But yeah, the Porsche seems to be carrying its strength through from practice, with Wushel with a nice time there of 2:02 flat. But yeah, definitely, at least for my eyes, it looks a little bit wetter than it was in practice. Not that you would know because you weren't here; you were sleeping.
You know? No comment. it's been a long week. But yeah, certainly. I mean, regardless, though, I'm more talking about just locally in the session. It is you're gonna see the conditions get a bit clear on track, just with the cars later in the lap, just because they have cars in front of them pushing some of the water out of the way. So I'll see them gaining a little bit more relative to the first cars out on track as Dipping Sauce throws it through the chicane. You can see that Lexus eating up all of the curb. Ooh, a little bit deep coming in. Just a snap of understeer, the water pushing that Lexus a little bit wide as the dip moves up to a 202.6. Solid time from the Lexus as we start to move closer and closer to drive times. We're preparing for a lap. I think catch who that was that snuck by them. Bushel starting another flyer here.
I think it was Skylar in the AMG. Yep, so we have Skylar joining us this time around in the Mercedes, a new driver for the championship. They were pretty quick. In the last championship we had, they were hassling the pro times, but never actually did finish the championship, so they did never get a promotion. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of what times they're putting this time around in the Silver Championship.
Yeah, always good to collect a new driver as well. I think actually this is officially now our largest race in the Silver Champ, so always good to see a few more drivers start coming in. Very interesting choice though from Skylar. Skylar, normally the resident NSX driver, taking a shift over to the Mercedes, so going to be quite a difference coming from a very stable plant. Well, maybe not stable, but a planted car in the NSX. It can be a little bit dramatic, but switching over to a very torquey front engine Mercedes, quite a difference from where they might be a little used to.
Yeah, the Mercedes, I actually drove it the other day. It's a completely different car than what it used to be. It's got a nice front end on it now, good rotation, and a nice feel through the wheel. Whereas beforehand, it was kind of, it just felt a bit numb on the front end, and you couldn't really feel what the front end was doing through the force feedback. So a nice update for the Mercedes. I can see why it's kind of the third choice at the moment after the Ferraris and the Porsches. But yeah, at the moment, the only person kind of getting close to Michelle is Dipping Sauce, who's just put a 202 in. I was about to say Nick, but they were just pipped to the post by Dipping Sauce in that Lexus.
Yeah, it's Suzuka coming in and getting a small improvement with a 202.8. Also further back, we have Deeds trying to put in a good lap. They have an improvement earlier on, and a 224 is what's going to be on the board for them. But interestingly, the fastest second sector by a full tenth of a second. So we can see something coming in from Deeds here, as well as the entire top four until excluding Wuschel's 202 flat. We are looking at about 2/10 covering 3 of our cars in the top 4. So very close qualifying. I would have imagined that rain, if anything, would have exacerbated those gaps, but we're seeing improvements all around and significantly smaller gaps than we might have regularly seen at the start.
Yeah, Castrol currently in P16 absolutely dominated last time out in Suzuka, so it looks like they're struggling a little bit to get the car set up properly for the rain.
Yeah, it goes to show just the ebb and flow of things. We've seen Denak, who basically dominated that first race as well, P10. Another Ferrari that's quite off the pace as well, but I think this season 1.9, the tire prep, the tire temperatures play such an important factor. Just came off of kind of our first competitive race, or my first competitive race myself, in terms of running ACC again now in 1.9. It's very, very different in terms of the setup, the driving style, and everything that you need to start to appeal to make these cars have pace. And I think some of these drivers are still trying to understand that, because every single one of these tracks has different, brand new set of challenges coming in each and every time. As 10x getting the best run coming out into the infield section of the track. But yeah, that Ferrari perhaps maybe just not getting hooked up like it needs to. It seems Ferrari is actually not anywhere near as dominant as it used to be in the dry. We'll have to see. Maybe the Ferraris just need a little bit more time to get those tires working.
Yeah, it's good for us, but not good for the Ferrari runners that we are having a bit of a shuffle this time around. It looks like that, at least judging by the time so far, we're going to get a bit of a shake up front, which is only good for us. And Rochelle still holding pretty strong there with 202 flat. Dipping sauce currently a couple of hundreds improvement, not too much to shout home about. The track doesn't seem to be improving actually. The only person really improving on their time is Kestrel, who doesn't actually. Sorry, they do have a time in of the 2:04.2, but they're only currently 9/10 up, so that's going to put them probably around 12th or 13th, depending on how they carry this lap through.
Yeah, it needed an absolute monster chicane or final corner, maybe unless their last lap had a sizable mistake. I don't see them coming in usurping Wusho here, but still a very, very sizable improvement when you're looking at about 7/10 when they first were setting a lap, and it's going to be about a 1 second gain, a 2-minute 3.3. So about on pace with where Denak is, and it seems that perhaps this is just where the Ferrari's meant to stay this week.
Yep, we do see Anka up there in third with a 2:02.4, so there is some pace in the Ferrari left. So maybe just not suited to the wet conditions. Maybe it has got a little bit wet since these times are put down, because it definitely seems to not be, at least not for me. It doesn't seem to be there's a dry line. There's definitely a less wet line, but there's still some puddles and some rivers hanging about on track that are going to be causing havoc with the drivers' lines.
Yeah, I mean, coming into wet rut running as well, there are also instances where you could almost accidentally gain time too. I mean, of course, you have the track will go through phases of it being drier and wetter and so on and so forth, and it does appear to be running into the wetter phase right now. But there's times where you might get a little bit of a oversteer moment coming into the corner, especially with these Ferraris, which seem to be quite front limited right now in these wet conditions. That could be exactly what you need. Not to discredit anything with Anka's time, especially with how competitive it is, having just beaten out two drivers by less than half a tenth. It is still a very, very strong time. But perhaps, especially looking at the competition around the relative car pace, there was one of those little bits of wiggles of oversteer that shuffled them in, giving them just that little bit extra time, and then Deeds as well getting just that as well. It's a very tricky one. Rather inquisitive to why the Ferraris are so off the pace, but that's certainly not something will be answered very soon as we see Denak pop in a 2-minute 2.9. So perhaps there is a little bit of time. Maybe we're going through a phase where everything is just a little bit extra wet and just couldn't get things working, and now all the drivers starting to get that pace back out on track.
Yeah, Wishel not improving, but her first sector is 2/10 faster than anyone on that Porsche, so obviously that first hairpin after turn one just kind of playing to the Porsche's strengths of maximum traction out of the corners. As we do see, sector one's a little bit slower than sector two. Sector two has a little bit of high speed on it, so maybe that's playing towards the Ferrari strengths. Anka currently fastest in sector two by 2/10. I can't actually see it fast as sector 3. I think it's Rochelle with a 57.9, but I think someone might have went a little bit quicker than that, but hasn't actually popped it up on their fastest times.
Factus Sector 3, at least according to my screen, is Skylar in that Mercedes with an 18.1. A surprisingly short sector, and as soon as I say that, it just got usurped by Dipping Sauce with an 18.145. 6,000s faster, but just had to make sure I was wrong as soon as I said anything.
So I think, I'm using a different timing screen so I can see what their fastest laps were. It shows me their sector times for that lap, so yeah. I think it's a 50. I don't know where I'm getting 57 from. So maybe the way I'm looking at this is a different way that it shows me. Yeah. Maybe closing in on Wurshell here. Does a 2:16, so improves her time there by 0.4 of a second, and gaps then dipping sauce by a further 0.6. So yeah, Wurshell definitely seems to be carrying the speed she had from practice into qualifying. If I was her, I'd be pretty confident right now going into the race.
Yeah, quite an ominous time coming in from Wishaw, and that was very, very strong across the lap. Looking at least timing from that lap, first sector, only driver in the 57s, and in the 57s at the 57.8. Very, very deep into the 57s, as well as almost putting in that best sector 2, and once again, best sector 3 by over a tenth from anyone else. So quite an ominous and very well put together lap from Wushel. That could be very dangerous in the long run here, but we are on board right now with Paul. Switching over to Anka as well, who appears to be setting another strong lap or throwing it onto the back straight. And the chicane, very, very tricky chicane, especially since you naturally take a lot of curb with the wet, making that a little bit trickier as we see Anka take a fair amount of bounce from that sausage curb on the inside, just kissing it a little bit, but still very well put together. Final corner, is it going to be an improvement? Yes, and it's going to be an exact same time with Deeds, a 2-minute 2.325. Exactly the same. So I'm going to make sure that Anka is aware of that, and I'm sure that Sausage Curb won't be getting any Christmas cards this time.
Yep, so it looks like we do follow the F1 rules of whoever put the time down first gets the time if they do match exactly. So Deeds there keeping a hold of third place just by the skin of his teeth. Skin of his teeth? Is that right? Is that the right saying?
It's at least how it's said over here, but we know how many things in the U.S. are done
I don't
incorrectly.
remember. I don't remember my teeth having skin, but we'll rule with it anyway. We actually are up to 17 drivers now. As Nate has joined us in the Lamborghini, but yet to set a time, so he'll be starting at the back of the grid.
Oh, typical Nate, even later than me. That's
and
quite
he's disappeared
impressive.
again.
Oh, just as I started talking about him. Oh, figure. But we're jumping back on track. We're on board with Randomy here, who is starting to get to grips with that Ferrari and setting personal best through the first two sectors, or just the first sector, sorry. Let me throw it in once again through that chicane. A lot of curb taken. The Ferrari always was the compliant car, so a decent lap for them. Let's see how are they able to wrap this lap up. It was an improvement to start, but no, it would actually ended up disappearing in that final two corners. So unfortunate for them. Another driver we have on board or have on track to improve, Luna, further down the field. With that Porsche, we've not talked much about them. The secondary Porsche after Bushel's had such a dominant run so far. Well, Luna just coming off of the RCI 6 hours at Catalonia, I believe, driving with Tig Gang. I'm not sure if it's a guest driver or a permanent resident, but they're throwing it into that chicane. You can just see the Porsche eating that weight transfer from side to side. And Luna with a very well put together final corner. Is this going to be an improvement? And yes, it is. It's going to be a 2-minute 2.2 for Luna. And that's going to push everyone down a spot except for Wushel.
Yep, that gives us a Porsche 1-2 pretty much for the race. I don't think anyone's gonna usurp that, although Anka is 2/10 up, 3/10 up now, so they might be in with a shot. Nope, they've lost it all again down to a 1/10. So maybe they'll gain possibly 2 positions with this, as they still have a fair bit to go in this lap. So yeah, 2/10. It's kind of to and fro between 2/10 and 1/10. And let's see how this lap pans out. Either they do go a bit wide and they do actually invalidate that lap, so that won't count.
A track limit of Porsche always as punishing as you'd imagine in real life, and just giving up that lap, pulling off into the gravel to reset. Well, it looks like last lap for every single person out on track there, but the only person that made it to the line is going to be Luna. Luna is actually improving so far through the first section of track here. As we roll back out down towards Dunlop Hairpin, and Luna still throwing a little bit of improvement, lost a little momentum coming up, and the Schumacher S just invalidating, picked up a little bit of understeers, typical for that corner, as it's very, very easy to just get pushed offline, and as soon as you do, you lose that camber, and that's going to solidify our results, as Blade Wolf, don't believe, made it in time to get that lap. Well, overall, a very, very interesting qualifying. Grid shaking up quite a bit. Biggest shock for me, though, Dipping Sauce putting that Lexus all the ways up in P3. A car that was known for not having the downforce and really relying on its power is really kind of shined this week once the rain's broken out.
Yeah, it looks it's kind of a case of the more things change, the more they stay the same. As the Porsche and the Lexus seem to have gotten their groove back in the wet. I know pre 1.8 the Lexus kind of dominated on wet tracks as well as the Porsche, and then 1.8 came along and kind of took that away from them. But it seems they've been given that back in 1.9 with the tires. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if the two Porsches can keep that Lexus at bay, because I know there's a good 3 to 5 kilometer/hour difference between the Porsche and the Lexus on the top speed. With the Porsche, Luna's Porsche at least topping out at 240, and Dipping Sauce topping out at 244 with that Lexus and that gigantic V8.
Yeah, so even out in the rain, the Lexus still managing to stretch his legs a little bit. Very, very strong time, though, from Deeds. You've seen that Lexus has always been able to push a couple extra Ks out on the competition. But, yeah, overall, the Porsche is starting its down. It's as it used to in the wet. I've personally thought the 992 was quite weak under traction, at least for a Porsche, that is. It's still quite strong compared to everything else. Well, it's looking like it's come back out to make sure that everyone knows it is the wet weather king, as that we see that Stuttgart brand put a P1 or a front row lockout, my bad, as we transfer over to the grid. So there's drivers coming out onto the grid, putting in full fuel, setting things up. For a wet race, though, very, very different from a dry race, especially with so many variables that can change. How exactly would you prepare to put in an hour worth of stinting? What are your tire pressures looking like? Are you going to increase, decrease from qualifying? That fuel load and dry line is going to be changing every single lap and affecting how much those tires scrub. What are your main concerns once you start setting up for fuel or for the race conditions here in the wet?
So I don't know 1.9. I actually haven't driven any wet in 1.9, but I know the temperature matters for your tires. It's not so much pressures. So you want to get those temperatures up and get the temperatures on the tires. You want to get them nice and hot. But the recommended PSI is around 30, I know, for the wet. But again, that doesn't matter. If you're up to 30 and the tires are too cold, bring them down and get the temperature in the tires. Otherwise, you start losing the grip on the tire. The blocks don't heat up. You start tearing off the tire. But yeah, we're going to go through our track walk now, I think, and start off from P1 with Michelle. As we see, yep, Michelle in P1 there, followed by Luna closely behind, with 6 tenths behind in P2. Dipping Sauce just a couple of thousandths behind in P3 in the Lexus. As we see then, the first Ferrari of the day is Deeds, 7 tenths back then in the 757 Ferrari. If a exactly matching time is Anka in the number 40 Ferrari for TGR. And then we have Newbie in the first BMW of the day, 8 tenths back. Suzuka then 1 second back in the third Ferrari. Not too much of a good showing there from Suzuka. They'll not be happy with that. Skylar then 1.2 seconds back in the Mercedes. Kestrel, last week's winner, again, pretty much 1.3 seconds back. Can't imagine they'll be too happy with that circle then. Just bringing up P10 and 1.3 seconds back. Pretty close so far, showing kind of a couple of tenths here and there between drivers. Denak P11 are, yep. Just about to say our championship leader, but actually they're not leading the championship. Paula Brady starting P12 in the Mercedes, 1.4 seconds back. With the ultimate punting machine, which I believe is Randomi. It could be wrong. No, Randomi's 15th,
MNU.
excuse me. MNU is P13, then the Ferrari with Blade Wolf 1.8 seconds back from the lead. I don't think Blade will be too happy with that. He was expecting to be a little bit further up the field, as we then do catch up with the Randomi in P15 in the Ferrari. And then finally, taking up the rear, 1.9, pretty much 2 seconds back, is Oraz in the BMW.
Yeah, all tight through the entire grid, though, looking at all those qualifying times. I definitely look forward to this race. Again, what's more, I would have figured that the wet was going to shake things up again, but it looks like we're going to be ready for quite a tight and interesting race. There's not really anywhere where I think there's a large gap in qualifying, any large disparities in pace, so definitely gonna be in for a wild ride here, just like we were at Suzuka. So I would lock in, get nice and prepared, as we see even on the cooldown lap that spray just starting to blind the drivers here. Deeds taking a look through up in P4, all the ways back in P10, P12, 14. That spray is going to be multiplied even worse. So it's going to be one of the topics of today, especially if the rain starts to get worse. It'll be one of the things we want to keep our eyes on, although I believe forecast is going to be looking at staying the same. So the start of this race might be the worst that we're going to see in terms of spray. So these drivers just need to prepare their goggles for the start of the race. They're going to see a little bit of pumping and weaving as the drivers try to put a little bit of temperature into those tires. Very, very tricky in cold or in wet weather conditions, as that water is always cooling down the surface of those tires, and you're just trying to fight that with the brakes and some weaving and just getting something into those tires.
Yep, it looks like, in fact, Randomi has decided to start from the pit lane. Whether or not that's a choice or is that a bit of a bug, I'm not too sure. But yeah, it's going to be interesting up the front. The Porsche is obviously very quick off the line, but it's going to be interesting to see what that Lexus of Dipping Sauce can do.
Yeah, it'd be very, very interesting indeed. Just in topics of our Drivers' Championship, as we were mentioning that, Newbie actually leading our Drivers' Championship with 2 P2s. So Captain Consistency actually taking the lead from there. I was under the impression that was going to be Anka, but Anka actually knocked down to P2 with their, I believe it was a P2 and a P3, I want to say.
I think you're right, yeah. It was a P3 last time out in Suzuka for them.
And then Kestrel, our first of our race winners, is sitting in P3, tied with Denak in P4, both sitting on 40 points. So our 2 race winners, not even in the top 2. Very, very interesting statistic there. Very, very tight championship so far. Top 4, separated 4 points. It's going to be a long run as we set up into the final corner. You see those cars starting to pump their brakes just a little few last times that they can sneak it in as we roll through the last corner for the first time in the race. See Dipping just getting right under that rear wing, getting ready to unleash the V8 horsepower of that Lexus. But it's the German machines leading the German Grand Prix here, and the lights are green. The Porsches are free to run away, and just look at that traction as they sprint down into turn 1. The roar of all the different engines as we see everyone looking very nice and tidy through that first corner. And no scares or anything as Wushel starts to run away with it.
Bit of a contact there in the midfield. And yeah. Looks like Anka maybe has lost a few places there. Yeah. it's Denac. Sorry, Denac got a little bit of a bump there in the Mercedes arena, and has lost a few places down to P11.
Knocked down a little bit as we see Dat Sergel looking to the inside of turn 5, but unable to make it work out as they have to now file in with the rest of the grid. Denac trying to recover. That's going to be a very big shock for them, as it looks like Kestra had actually ended up sneaking past them through that incident, and that's going to be big for their championship battle. But even bigger is the fact that these Porsches are starting to run away with it a little bit. Decent traction coming in from the Ferrari, but look at that Italian train. Poor Ferrari's line astern, all cars that were up near the sharp end of the grid now battling it out in our midfield. So Denac falling, trying to look for any kind of gap, but unable to get anything. But filing out through the first lap, we're looking at Wuschel, Luna, Dipping Sauce, your top 3, followed up by Deeds and Anka. So very few changes with that starting order, as a newbie sits in P6 with the first front engine machine in that BMW, followed by Skyler, Suzuka, Kestra, and Dat Sergel in your top 10, currently under pressure from this driver, Denac. So we see a cone go flying through the chicane. Sure, that's not the first time one of those cones are going to be hit, and soon there's going to be none, but we see Paul going a little bit deep into that final corner, able to keep it clean, as Kestrel trying to put a little bit of a move onto Suzuka here, but doesn't look like the drive is there. Suzuka carrying a little bit of momentum, but Kestrel wanting to keep a nose in and deep under the brakes, able to get it stopped, and Suzuka now carrying that momentum around the outside, but turn 2 switches back inside line to Suzuka, so very hard for Kestrel to try to carry this around, keeping a nose in it. But turn 3s, once again, need to go very deep. Able to hang it around side. Very well done by Kestrel to carry that momentum inside for 4, and able to make it stick all over that Astro, and Suzuka losing that momentum. And now we're seeing Dat Sergel coming around the outside of turn 5. Oh, a little bit of contact, but able to get it back in line. Kestrel drifting a little bit wide, but now under attack from Denac. Goes Dat Sergel, able to fend that off. But these Ferraris all very, very punchy as they try to push their way up the order.
Yep, as we see, just that we haven't seen actually Dipping Sauce getting past Luna into P2, so yeah, that Lexus, I think, putting to good work those big chunky tires in that V8. As we see, I think it's D's right up behind Luna now, so Luna maybe had a bit of an issue there in turn 1 in the first lap, or the second lap, should I say, as D's is really putting them under pressure now.
I'd have to imagine the tires for the Porsche, we talked about needing a little bit of time to get those tires up to temperature. Oh, it looks like Luna is not going to be given that for free, as we look at the spray through newbies on board. Oh, a little bit of oversteer on the curve. Oh, what is that? Advin Bogan at newbie got a little bit oversteer there. A little surprising to see his wiggle through there. Well, newbie's now under threat coming into the final corner after a rough final chicane, as Anka's going to be taking a look at the inside. Newbie is going out, but able to carry that momentum, should be able to get the drive back on the straight here. And yes, Anka having to file right back in. So Ferrari had an opportunity there, but newbie able to salvage that deep moment as we go into turn 1 for the 3rd time this race. So once again, the wet weather is starting to bite a little bit. Mistakes, it's kind of not glorified, but they're definitely exaggerated a little bit more. As soon as you get offline and that wet line, or that dry line isn't there anymore, you're definitely going to start struggling with the traction, and maybe almost got bit by that. They're able to hang into that P5 there. You can just see the amount of time that they lost just trying to recover to Deeds. Oh, coming back in, or you have Denac sitting in P10, starting to try to close that gap up to Dat Sergel. That's going to be perhaps staying about stagnant where we were last time we were hanging out with Denac here, but that Sergel starting to push lap times in their favor as we're starting to close close that gap with the driver in front after that little bit of battling with Castro. Actually, no, sorry, Castro starting to run away with the gap and push up to Anka. So NetCircle maybe having to keep their eyes in the rearview mirror. Anka here in this battle with Kestrel, and then directly in front, that's Skylar Vixen in that all-white Mercedes-Benz. So that Merc car we talked about, very, very torquey machine. It's going to be struggling to put that power down later in the stint. They're going to likely see it start to fall back a little bit just because of what that car is like. Oh, and Kestrel, maybe a dive up the inside, but no, nothing coming in from them as Anka is able to hold strong here. Bit audacious coming in from Kestrel there, but able to make it work as we see Luna now starting to walk away from this group behind. Maybe those tires in that Porsche starting to work just a little bit better. Deeds starting to be put under pressure from Newbie as well. And actually that BMW looking like it has quite a strong traction underneath that Bavarian Motorworks machine. And yeah, it looks like Deeds might be under a very serious threat from our championship leader right now as we head through turn 4 and the run to turn 5, starting to just try to stretch the legs of those Ferraris. And that Ferrari, again, we mentioned it before, very, very weak in terms of working its tires. It's good for endurance racing. Well, right now in the wet weather, it is working against it, and Luna's starting to get caught up a little bit more by Deeds once again, and it looks like this Porsche is just not working right in these race conditions because Deeds is just starting to claw back every time in corner entry. We saw a little bit of understeer as we tipped it in to the Dunlop hairpin, and it's gonna be some warning signs for this Porsche. Maybe an adjustment for tire pressures needs to be made during that pit stop. We're only 8 minutes in, but this is all information that these drivers are going to be taking in. All right, where am I strong? Where am I weak? What's going on with my pressures? Am I in or out of the window? And Deeds with a little bit of a tap as we come into turn 13, Wachsteiner curve, and that's going to be a big scare for Luna, but that's going to be a bigger scare now for Deeds as he's now under attack around the outside. Goes the BMW, and that's our championship leader stamping his authority, but a little bit of curve is going to open up the inside for Deeds to make a counter attack, and Deeds holding that tight line, but we saw Newbie carry that momentum around the outside last time. Is he able to make it stick this time? It looks like they might be side by side around the main straight, and yes, that BMW a little bit stronger on the straights right now. Newbie able to hang it around as we go deep into the braking of one. Are we able to get around? But Newbie's trying to just get the front end, but the track falling away. But inside of turn 2, side by side, space is given, and now Newbie with the preferred line coming into 3. Deeds has got to concede here, and yes, it's exactly what he's going to do, but maybe looking for a cutback. Coming into 4, setting up early, over, under, and it's going to be the outside for turn 5. Newbie lost momentum here as we ride on board with Skylar, who has the best seat in the house, trying to watch Newbie fend this off, and it looks like that move is finally going to stick. What a daring move from Newbie, though, through the chicane of all places.
And it took 5 corners for it to actually finish. As we see Skylar not running with wipers at the moment. I don't know whether that's a tactic or just not really seeing the need for wipers under this weather conditions. But they do have the rain light on, so there's no issue there. We do see that's allowed Luna to get a little bit further away from them too. But Dipping Sauce pulling in another 4-second, 3-second gap pretty much to Luna, and Wishell out in front another 3 seconds.
Absolutely. I mean, if that doesn't wake you up, I don't know what will. Naturally, of course, the top 3 starting to pull away a little bit with that battle, but that battle, now look at this train that has formed. We have drivers all the ways from P4, and I think it's dropping all the ways back to P10 if I'm not mistaken. All these drivers now nose to tail as we see people taking a little bit of a look to the inside. I think that's Kestrel in the back there, and Dedak a little bit wide, maybe going for a move on Sergel, a little homage to Newbie's move around the outside. A little bit of contact in the final corner as Denex starting to get those elbows back and elbows out, trying to get that position back. And Suzuka needn't concede there. That
little bit of a tap, maybe not the nicest thing coming in from Denak, but all is fair in GT Racing. Both cars continue on, and now Suzuka is going to be looking to absolutely assault the rear wing as we see one car spun around. I believe that was Skyler in that all-white Mercedes-Benz. Unsure what happened to them. Maybe we can try to get a look on what happened, but that car looks very damaged. Rear end of that Mercedes just scuffed to all end. I'd have to guess that someone went a little deep under braking, and there was a hard contact.
I think it looks like there's something between Anka as well, as Anka's now pretty much stopped after turn 1, letting Skylar pass. So yeah, it looks like something happened there. Maybe a little too deep on the brakes from Anka. Yep, it looks like it. Yep, just unfortunate there for Skylar. Just got took out by Anka and Kestrel, just a random victim there.
Yeah, it just looks like one of those instances where you maybe go that extra 5 meters too deep. And we talked about the wet weather exaggerating mistakes. And once you're that 5 meters too deep in the wet, and there's no getting the car stopped, if you try to turn, you start to aquaplane because those tires aren't going perfectly straight. It just makes it that much worse. And I think that's what just happened to Anka there. And then really hard contact for Kestrel, just nowhere to go, as we see that Ferrari sliding all over the place, and maybe down into the 11 we might see him move, but no, Kestrel moving back and trying to hold the line. But that circle now with a much better run, that stricken and wounded Ferrari tight on the door at that circle as we move into the hairpin. A little bit of bish and bang, but it looks like Kestrel's going to be able to hang it out just in front. Maybe a little less arrow on that Ferrari, but that's going to be a little bit of foreshadowing for this race, I'd have to imagine, as these Ferraris are starting to get a little bit of door banging out and a little bit of contact, showing that this is not an open wheel, no contact sport. We are not afraid to lean on each other, and Kestrel just putting it on display right there. This is going to be a very tall order for all three of these drivers to try to shift past this this P6 Ferrari. I don't see any way that he's going to make this easy with that damage up front.
Yep, and I'm just watching on my screen as well. Newbie went a little deep into turn 1, that brought Deej right back onto the tail of him. As we are looking on board now, Danak, who seems to have kind of gotten a free pass for the mistake he made at the Vidal chicane there. The weather, at least on my side, looking as if we're going to be seeing a little less intensity in the next half an hour. So that could play a little bit of havoc into the pit stop window.
No, certainly. Imagine seeing that most of our drivers would want to try to extend their stints even. Worth reminding that the pit window opens 20 minutes after the start of the race, and it will stay open for 20 minutes totals. In that time, you have to come in and make a mandatory tire change. Whether or not you take any fuel is up to you, but that tire change is mandatory. Most of these drivers most likely putting in about half their race tank, maybe a little bit more, so they have an open strategy window, and then they'll pop in the rest of fuel under that tire change. Well, as we see someone who might be wishing that pit window was open, and it is Kestrel with that very scuffed up front end of that Ferrari, able to hold strong though, keeping a decent pace, as actually it appears maybe opening that gap a little bit to that circle. So maybe not needing that splitter of that Ferrari, perhaps even causing a little bit of instability that might be working with the number 46 here as we go deep into the chicane once again, and a lot of curve. A big slide coming from Kestrel, and that's going to open up the window for Sergel, but not close enough. So that gap that was able to be opened up by Kestrel actually saving them for that mistake. But now Denak carrying the momentum on Sergel, and this could be a massive mistake this mistake could transfer from Kestrel to Sergel, as Denak looking down the inside deep on the far inside line. A lot of water in there, and able to get it stopped a little bit deep. And now over under coming in from Sergel. Denak's got the preferred line inside for the next two corners, and it's going to be for Sergel to keep it deep and hung around, but no, Denak able to fend them off in that position. Now going to stick, as Sergel going to be looking to try to make a move back past the number 54 Tig Gang racing car in Suzuka, trying to take another position off Sergel. As we look further back in P10, the 148 Mercedes out, Paula Brady also looking to gain a position out of this.
Yep, some good racing all around here. As a couple people have gotten free passes into good positions. Castrol at least hanging on to that position for the meantime, even with that damaged car. So, as we saw coming down to the Vidal chicane, a lot of top speed in that Ferrari for Castrol. So maybe that's why they weren't just a little bit unsure in qualifying. But it looks like that makes them harder to pass in the race.
Certainly so, and perhaps, I mean, even with that mistake that we saw coming from Kestrel, they were within 2/10 of Newbie up front, as well as, I mean, they're 5/10 off of Deeds, but you could say probably the majority of that time, that 2/10 or so that they lost to Newbie was certainly from that big oversteer moment and maybe not being most settled for the final corner. So that Ferrari still has a little bit of pace as we jump into the helmet can of Paula Brady here. And as we talked about earlier in the race, visibility not the best there, as you see that spray getting kicked up from all the Italian machines up front. Well, having to look straight through that is Paula all the way in the back here, and it's even causing the rear end Suzuka's car up front to kind of get washed out. The bright kind of silver on the rear end of that number 10 blending in with the spray, but Paula's working strong to get up through that spray, push through a little bit more, and maybe is trying to dive deep on her turn one here, gaining a little bit of time as the cars start to stack up. And this is where that Ferrari or the Mercedes might start to strength or flex its muscles a little bit, as you're going to see it gaining under that mechanical grip. But Denak starting to flex his muscles on Kestrel here, maybe starting to use the advantage of that damage, and a daring move down the inside. Denak with a little bit of a tap into the inside of turn 4. Kestrel able to hold that straight. That looked like a very dangerous move if that was any later, because that was the rear wheel. Kestrel able to hold it straight though, and Denak really on edge and eager to move up this position, knowing he's got the pace. And Kestrel is now going to be staring the rear view mirror as we head into Dunlop Curve, and it's going to be Kestrel leading. Denak able to get it stopped, but you can just see how much more compliance that number 54 has. The 46 struggling every time we tip it into braking here, but through the Schumacher S's, there's not an opportunity here. A little bit of a tiny wiggle from Kestrel, but starting to open it up, and look at that gap that Kestrel's able to open the moment we get onto the long straights here. So Denak not having that straight line advantage that Kestrel has. Well, Kestrel just trimming that car out a little bit more. Maybe that's the secret to keeping that Ferrari in line with that front end damage. You don't really plan for it, but that could be working to his advantage in the defensive game here.
Yep, as we can see, the top speed of that Ferrari of Kestrel is just causing havoc for all those behind. A little bit of curb bouncing there going on, but yeah, some pretty aggressive driving there from Denak. I think that was a little bit audacious into that corner, just coming out of the Mercedes arena, showing the nose. But yeah, it's a little bit of gap starting to show up now in this train, but Kestrel's doing a very good job of that damage.
Absolutely. I mean, that move in turn 4, I mean, it is a move you can make, but you need to be right on the rear bumper of the car in front of you, because you need to really sling that in the moment they open up. You throw it around the inside. Things just a little bit too far, a little bit too late coming in front of Denak. Everyone keeps it in line, no real long term, but it looks like Denak might be trying to set it again. Kestrel the wiser though, keeping the momentum, and this could be dangerous for Denak, because now Sergel's going to be taking a look, and this is where we're going to start seeing the racecraft coming in from these drivers, because every time Denak sends that move, it's going to pull Sergel, Suzuka, Paula, and I believe Blade Wolf is now filing up to the back of this train just that little bit closer. So now is when you need to start looking, okay, I need to make a safe move, because every time you go for a dive here, you give the opportunity the other drivers, and a little bit deep goes Denak, needing to hang it around the outside for the momentum, and it looks like you're able to hang it in there, but Kestrel is just absolutely harassing these drivers with that cornering pace, but unable to get anything on the straights because Kestrel's just walking away from these guys.
Yep, as our pit window has opened, but I don't think we're going to see anyone in too soon, as we are showing, of course, the rain intensity decreasing in the next 30 minutes. So I think that's going to play into the pit kind of strategies at the moment, as we see Suzuka then really up behind that circle now. Could go for a move into the chicane here, but it's going to be a risky one.
Yeah, but it's not impossible. We saw Newbie even make it around the outside. So as long as you're close enough, if you have the confidence and compliance in that car, you can absolutely make a move stick. But it looks like actually Circle going in, immediately trying to pit. Perhaps a little bit of pit strategy here. As we see going side by side is Denak finally making that dive on Kestrel. That straight line of the Ferrari maybe trying to stretch its legs as Kestrel leads going into turn one. Denak needing to go deep underneath the brakes and throwing up the inside. You see the rear end wiggle a tiny bit as it straightens out. And it looks like Denak may be able to get the inside and able to file in. Yes, and Kestrel not having the compliance ended up braking, as we also saw Suzuka going a little bit deep there, and I think Paula sneaking by. So Denak finally moving up front there. As I was saying, I think big wash of understeer caused by a snap on that curb. Kestrel really struggling with that Ferrari now, as Paul is going to be looking to put an attack on, carry that momentum out. But I think the curb just ruining that run, as now Suzuka is going to be trying to make it look coming into turn 5.
Yeah, I think Kestrel then getting caught out by the dirty air coming from Denak, as that's kind of the first time he'll have run with dirty air behind a car with that front damage. Paula looking a little bit feisty here, trying to catch up to Kestrel.
Yeah, Kestrel, I think, probably affecting the pitch strategy here coming in. I think Circle likely coming in to try to undercut just by manner of everyone getting held up, maybe expecting to gain time on everyone due to that. In fact, Circle might still gain that time because Kestrel did battle Denak. They would have lost a couple tenths going into there, so there could be a very, very interesting pit exit as we roll out onto the end of this pit cycle. 17 minutes till that comes around, and 17 minutes for all these drivers to sort out what they want to do. We mentioned the rain intensity is decreasing. Well, that's not happening for another 30 minutes, so it's not going to be a case of you can see what's happening and then sort it out from there. It's going to be, you need to assume what's going to happen based off of the weather cues you are given, and you need to make that adjustment in advance. With a lot of curb coming in from Kestrel, that Ferrari getting tossed around, maybe trying to use a little bit too much of the compliance that machine had. Well, Paula having plenty of compliance from the front end of that Mercedes, being able to tuck it in to that final corner, and maybe a very strong run down the main straight. It's the first time we've seen Kestrel start to get ran on down the straightaway, and that Mercedes with all the top end speed and also a ton of grip. Kestrel around the inside trying to just hang on, and Paula not able to get it to stick. So one more lap that Kestrel's able to hang strong in that 46. You're seeing that pressure mounting as the Mercedes is really starting to come alive in the later edge, or the later stint of this race. And maybe those tires just working a little bit better window, maybe a little bit better wear. We know that Mercedes doesn't struggle with the same problems that the Ferraris were struggling with tire wear. Maybe that's going all the ways into the wet tires here, because that Mercedes looks absolutely on fire in the back half of the stint.
Yep, we do seem to have missed though. Luna has lost third place to Newbie, and Deeds in fourth as Luna drops all the way down to fifth, so maybe a little bit of incident there we seem to have missed. But hopefully we can find out what happened and let you know. As we do see Wishell 7 seconds now to the good of dipping in that Lexus. Again, another 5 seconds ahead of Newbie, so not too much happening up front as Paul goes a little bit wide, and that lets Suzuka get a good run. Or is it going to happen? No. Oh, just watch out for that wet AstroTurf there, Suzuka. That's not what you want to do.
Yeah, a little bit of a squeeze coming in from Paula, as well as we rolled into RTL Curva in turn 10. So it's starting to get their arms or their elbows out when they need to, and that's allowed Kestrel to just sneak away. 1.8 seconds now is the gap. So Kestrel able to keep that pace when those mistakes are held in line. Suzuka's now darting into the inside, and we see MNU for the first time, the ultimate punting machine, as they so aptly named themselves. Well, with that bright, like orange cream Ferrari, I almost want to say, starting to file onto the back of that train. Maybe we'll see them run a little bit longer stint now that they've caught everyone here, and everyone's darted into the pits. This would be their time to start making that stint work. Into turn 1, we see them getting a little bit of a wiggle as well, so putting that car on edge. But Deeds now our closest driver on track,
keeping newbie honest, keeping newbie under pressure. If I'm not mistaken, we saw these two, line of stern, all race at Suzuka, so storylines continue as Deeds is right behind newbie here, putting the pressure on. Gap 1.3 seconds, so maybe Deeds with a little bit more momentum as it drops to 1.2, so could be edging towards a little bit of a battle. Here's a little bit of a wiggle on that curve. Deeds might be going a little deep, and it's into the gravel. That's, a very, very dangerous moment there, and that's exactly what can happen. A little lapse in concentration. All it takes is half a wheel on those curbs, and those curves, that painted tarmac is not grippy at all when wet. It does not absorb the water, so that water sits right on the surface, and Deeds found out the hard way that there is no grip under those circumstances.
Yep, a little bit deep into the Dunlop chicane, or sorry, Dunlop hairpin, should I say, as we see that gap newbie growing exponentially. Suzuka and Paula resuming their battle after the pit stops. It looks like they kind of had the same kind of decent pit stop each, so no time gained or lost there. I'm just trying to see kind of who's who and where everyone is on track. The closest battle at the moment is this battle we're seeing on screen. Kestrel has a little bit of a yellow flag there for Kestrel, so maybe, yep, it looks like they are. They seem to have had a bit of an accident and have, big incident, and they dart into the pits and they've lost it again. We did warn about that in the driver's brief. And it looks like that car's just lost all tires and ability to handle with that damage.
Do you think maybe there's secondary damage as we see some left side body panel damage for Kestrel? I think there might be something else that's happened to that car. Unsure if they maybe took contact after a spin through that chicane. There's someone else coming by, but the left side of that car looks beaten up. That could very easily be a tire knocked out of alignment. I mean, that Ferrari does not look like it used to be running earlier in this race. That thing looks like it has been absolutely destroyed with how it was handling, trying to get back up to speed there.
Yep, well, the barriers at the Vidal chicane aren't infinite. They do happen to be on the outside, so if you do end up making a big mistake at Vidal, you can catch the barriers, which I'd imagine is probably what's happened, judging by the damage on the left side of the car there.
Could be, but yeah, sure. Race director stewards aren't going to be too happy with that pit entry, though. Very, very dangerous jumping across the curb there and almost taking out, I didn't catch who that was, but almost collecting someone in that final corner with that understeer moment back across the curb. So definitely going to be something to take a look at. So bearing that in mind, Kestrel definitely going to be trying to put it back as we see the orange Kareem car is actually a Hooters livery on MNU. So it's a little bit interesting as we see them file out of the pits right behind Suzuka here. So they have indeed caught this pack, and this is, I believe, the effective battle for all the ways up to P6 with Paula, Suzuka, MNU, and Blade Wolf filing in as we're still waiting for a few drivers to come into their pits. Only 31 minutes remain, so about 10 minutes left in that pit cycle. Everyone, actually, Kestrel hasn't pit, but everyone from P6 up has not pit. With the exception of course, Kestrel as well in P8 there. So about half our grid still needing to file in here as we say that Denak comes into the pits, and I believe Oraz is also already in the pits as well. So two drivers to take off that list as you also see the BMW in the background, those headlights shining right through the rain as Denak's going to be hitting their marks and stopping. Hopefully right in that box. It looks like maybe gotten that car stopped quite well as I didn't see it get shifted. So gonna be a good pit stop from Denak. Not a lot of time lost, but oh my, first half of this race before the pit cycle so far has been rather interesting. Many of these drivers putting it all on the line as if it was a 15-minute sprint race and leaving nothing on the table, that's for certain, as we see MNU once again putting pressure onto Suzuka. Maybe not close enough to try to get a send. Oh, a little bit deep into the chicane. Careful there. We saw what happened to Kestrel. You don't want to pay homage to that moment because that's going to put you into the barrier. So definitely need to collect things a little bit more, but little time lost to Suzuka, able to hang it back in line, MNU putting the chase right back on.
Yeah, it seems like this group has managed to have a pretty decent stint. as we see Castle coming out. Doesn't look like they've repaired that damage, at least mostly. Still some front end damage on that car, so it'll be interesting to see if that's going to handle the way he wants it to.
And I'm shocked though that Kestrel, after his moment, filed back out in front of Suzuka and these guys. So I do see that there was quite a gap to Sergel and Denak, who they were previously with. So I'm very curious as we see Blable starting to put the pressure in on the tail end of this pack. That gap is, 7 seconds. It makes sense that Kestrel lost that time, but how did the rest of these drivers lose that time? I don't recall much battling or anything as we filed through here. Very, very interesting. I can't rack my brain around why that gap would have opened up as quick as it has.
Nope, but I think we're starting to see maybe a little bit of relentless, or a little bit of let up, should I say, on the rain. As we see, Newbie has blasted past Wichel for the fastest lap of the race with a 2:02.5. So definitely some pace coming out of that BMW as the fuel levels come down and the tires get a little bit more purchase onto the road, maybe with a little bit less water on the track.
Yeah, and our top three, the only three that who have not pit, so very interesting from them. Speaking of 3 drivers that haven't pit, Ranamy has apparently pit and pushed up to P4. So I'm unsure where that came, because Ranamy has been rather quiet this race. I wanted to say that was a timing error, but that's not moving around. So I'm gonna have to say that Ranamy is somehow snuck up to P4 through the pit cycles.
Kestrel again. Dropping. No, into the pits. Looks like the car. Oh no, they've had another incident. Massive damage in the front of that car. So yeah, that car definitely wasn't handling right after the pit stop. But yeah, it looks like randomly, as we take a look at here, what happened to Kestrel. Yeah, just Vidal chicane again. Just looks like. Oh, they've tried to come into the pits and have. Oh. Yep, we did warn about that in the driver's briefing. That was a bit of a dangerous pit entry. You can get it wrong and end your race. I think that's just what's happened there. It's just carried a little bit too much speed, and that's going to be their race over, I think, unfortunately for them.
Yeah, that Ferrari just took a massive hit, and we see it's stricken in the pit lane. I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. Of course, in real life, that would be a race ender, and I think that might hold true with how tight this grid has been this race. So, very, very unfortunate for Kestrel. Strong pace relative to the rest of the Ferraris, but that's going to unfortunately be the massive points loss for them in the championship. Talked about them earlier as we see Luna going a little bit deep, but Suzuka going down the order, and yeah, a little bit of an incident with MNU. I'm curious to see what happened there, as it looks like we're getting a warning that there was contact between those 2 drivers. Not seeing much damage, but that's going to be rather interesting as we jump into a replay here. Suzuka coming out of turn 6, the Ford curve, as we run down to Dunlop, and it looks like MNU maybe wanting to go for a dive.
Yeah, just a little bit too deep on the brakes and catches Suzuka, unfortunately. That's not what you want.
Yeah, an easy mistake to happen, but Suzuka, that's the second week in a row that Suzuka's no fault of their own, just a driver going too deep, as we see Luna going a little bit wide. In a big oversteer moment, I've dropped another position to Ranamy, they've dropped some more time. They were in front of Deeds and just lost it to them, I believe. So Luna now down to P6 with Randomy's movement up the grid. I really want to know how Randomy snuck up, but
I can't see that they've pit. There's no way have they pit, because they started in the pit lane. So I don't think they've caught up to Deeds and Random and Newbie that much with the pit stop. So I'm just going to see if I can find out have they actually complied with their pit stops.
Yeah, because my timing screen's saying they've pit. So that's the tricky one for me. Newbie, speaking of the pits, coming in for that pit, the BMW with that fastest lap, deciding that they have had enough. That bright yellow machine shining underneath the rain light, as We see the bumps in the pit lane, just shuffling that Bavarian Motor Works machine around as you take a nice close look at the number 17, your fastest lap holder and championship leaders. Now Random E's coming into the pit, so perhaps maybe not. Actually, perhaps that pit lane start throwing my pit count off. But now we're seeing Random E start to come into the pits some 15 seconds or so after Newbie. So should see their position shuffle out correctly. Just our timing software playing a little bit of tricks, but interesting that would give us a pit count there. But we see the number 17 BMW up front start to roll out of the pits there and file back out on track. So this is your not effective lead car, but this is your lead or furthest ahead car in terms of cars that have done their pits. So number 17 is going to be losing a little bit of time as we start firing up those tires, but everyone's going to have to be going through that. The Lexus and the Porsche of a Wushel and Dipping Sauce are going to have to go through it as well. And Edmund, you having another moment, is that through the chicane as we saw Wushel coming through to put them a lap down? But I think that's it is the chicane once again biting, and that's I'm going to have to take a look and see what happened, but I'd have to imagine just the curbs. Oh no, a little bit deep in, then the curbs.
Oh, you think you have it and then you don't. That's the worst kind of spin you can have, I think. It's just you feel like you're gonna catch it, and then it's just the car just says, no, actually, I don't think you do.
Yeah, the Vidal chicane biting once again, and I mean, knew it was gonna be a tricky corner as we rolled through, but. What a corner that's been, the Vidal chicane, throwing several drivers. If we hear a pit siren, and that's going to be both Dipping Sauce and Wushel coming into the pits. Believe the timing's going to be a little bit off there. Dipping Sauce just having a further ahead pit stall. Yeah, exactly what's going on there. So Wushel probably going to keep this lead unless there's some damage on that car that's going to knock them back. But these are your two race leaders. Wushel leading Dipping Sauce as we hear the engines in the background, so these cars are going to be getting ready to move, and that Porsche dropping off the jack, starting to run out of the pits, and that is going to be the lead held for Wushel here, because I don't think Newbie's anywhere close enough to get a challenge on, and no, exactly not, but Dipping Sauce going to be falling out soon as well. So the gap down, this could be close, as I've seen Newbie closing on the timing screen. Newbie's going to have those hot tires, so we're going to want to hang on for this, because Dipping's going to have to get the Lexus tires fired up, and Newbie's had a lap or two to get those things hot, and this is going to be where it starts to tick off. But Newbie, worth noting, is going to have a very tall order, because that Lexus is very, very strong in the straightaways. They might have the fastest lap, but that Lexus is going to have the legs on the straight. Just a little bit of foreshadowing for this. Dipping Sauce with the fastest speed trap at a 245 kilometers an hour, but Newbie not far behind with a 242, so that BMW does have some legs of its own with that straight 6 in the front of that machine, and it is getting very, very close as we tack onto the rear wing of Dipping Sauce. The tires not giving the grip that they would want, and Newbie's taking advantage of that right now. So right underneath the rear wing as we head into Dunlop Curva, as we get set up for the run up to the Schumacher S's, and now you can just see the pure raw horsepower of that Lexus just driving out of the hairpin as we tip it into the Schumacher S's. A little bit of curve from each wheel and setting up. You tip it into turn 11 or turn 10 hard on the brakes. Avoid that Astro.
Yeah, they'll be good on the brakes.
Very, very good on the brakes. Thought it was too deep there for a moment as we tip it into turn 11. And just look at the compliance on the front end of that BMW, but not able to hang on to the straight as the dragster opens up its top end and just runs away, going down into the chicane. This would have to be a big send for Newbie to try to make it like they did earlier in the race. But with a VTOL chicane, a lot of time gained because that BMW is so strong in that high downforce, in that grip limited section of the track. And this is going to be a very, very tall order because Newbie definitely has the grip on that Lexus. The number 17 really pushing the number 38 as the looks like a half a look, but that's not going to get Dipping to kind of move over, and it's going to be another lap here through the Mercedes-Benz arena that Newbie's going to be trying to gain that time, but their advantage is waning as those tires are starting to get hot on Dipping's car, and that means that Newbie's going to start to be gaining less and less time and really is going to struggle to keep up on the straights as we saw before, and I think that's already starting to happen as Dipping's started to open up that gap a little bit up to 0.8, so Newbie really need to start to go on the attack here if they're going to make anything come true of this.
Yep, Newbie, of course, was the fastest car on track before the pits, and of course, did have a little bit of traffic at the start of the race. So these two haven't came together yet for a battle, and it looks like Newbie's car is handling a little bit better than Dipping Sauce's car. But of course, it does have the top speed of the Lexus. It'll be interesting to see if Newbie can indeed close up, as we see Anka has kind of made their way onto the back of Suzuka now after that incident. Did that actually cause a I'm trying to think of the word, a change of position there between those two, possibly, as we see RL just in front of them, seems to have benefited from that.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, we are getting that indicator that there might have been contact there, but only for Suzuka's car, interestingly enough. But rather interesting there, as we saw, was it Suzuka that Anka ran into? I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, and then Suzuka was hit once again by Kestrel, which started the downward spiral for their race. But we see Newbie starting to really put that pressure back on, close that gap up by half a second per lap, and looking at their best times, it is half a second separating the two of these drivers, with Newbie a 2-minute 2.5 and Dipping almost a 2-minute 3 flat, a 2-minute 9.82. So this is all for Newbie to play for, and it's going to be a very, very tall order because that Lexus is going to be extremely strong in the straight. So you're going to have to see a move coming through something like the Mercedes-Benz Arena here. Maybe something like we saw with Denak coming into turn 3, ascend up the inside, but that Lexus looks really, really strong in this off-camber section of turn 2, and then that gap come turn 3, turn 4 is just a little bit too much for that BMW to handle, if you had to ask me.
Yep, as it looks like, in fact, as we see Anka there in the final corner having a little bit of a moment, maybe getting a little bit out of shape, and they have indeed retired the car. P2 in the championship has retired.
Yeah, it's very, very unfortunate. I mean, I'm curious what happened there, but I'd have to imagine just in line with what we've seen this race, that it wasn't the VTOL chicane. It looked like we were in the final corner there, just a little bit removed. But this is going to be a big, big week for Newbie. Big points haul. The closest driver that is challenging them in the championship would likely be either Deeds or Wuschel. They're both lined up and both 2 positions away. Wuschel probably going to be getting the biggest points haul here in the lead there, but P7 in the championship, the closest driver to Newbie right now, that is still in a strong position. Denak is further behind Deeds, maybe going to be able to put a challenge on later on in this championship, but it looks like they might be a little bit too far removed to be getting anything going for this race specifically. But Newbie, very, very well put together race, and looking for the trifecta of P2s as we roll into the VTOL chicane once again. You just see that gap as they close in on the Lexus once again. Ooh, a little bit of a wiggle coming through. That BMW just trying to grip up a little bit more. I don't think that BMW has the same compliance that it did before the pit stop. Perhaps maybe too big of an adjustment, expecting the rain to fall off a little bit more than it has. Unsure, though, at this moment. So as we roll into turn 1 for the 21st time, we're going to see Suzuka jumping back with them, putting pressure on Oraz coming to the VTOL chicane. And a little bit deep for Oraz. It's going to be a lot of curb, and that could be dangerous coming in from the BMW. Suzuka's able to get the over-under and into the final corner. Oraz kind of needing to just concede here, not able to carry that momentum and letting Suzuka by here. As we see in the back there, Randomly might be looking to try to benefit from that moment, but they might be a little bit too far as Oraz starting to get the run on the Ferrari, which does seem to be struggling on the straightaway here. Maybe a lot of aero and deep into turn 1 as Randomly may be missing their braking point, but able to get them ahead. But Oraz with the over-under able to see that coming. So good awareness from them, able to dodge I believe that Dodge ran me. So very, very smart move from Morris to wait on the turn in there as we're going to take another look back at that. Going down the main street, ran me quite a ways back. So this is quite the set. Hard on the brakes and just a little bit too late. That's the dry braking marker, and Randomly able to spot a gap and send it through. Oraz very smart to not turn in there. Good awareness again to spot what was going on around them, especially since they're in a battle with Suzuka. So well played for Morris. That 406 BMW still lives to fight another day. Very, very scary there for a moment as we rolled into turn one. We've seen quite heavy contacts there in the past, not just in this race, but in the history of motorsport. Is Oraz all over that curb and traction, struggling for that BMW. Randomly able to sneak by into the Schumacher S's, but a little bit of understeer. That's going to allow Oraz to come back here. You might see a little bit of a fight as that BMW has been very strong on the straights. Half a look as we roll into turn 10, but too far away as the 73 is going to hang on to that position and survive, and is going to be sights set on Suzuka. So Randomly starting to move up the order, but with 13 minutes left in this race, it'd be hard pressed to see how much more time that they can make up on the rest of the grid here.
Yep, as we see, at least Blade Wolf seems to be catching Paul a little bit, or then around Domi. Yeah, it seems to be a same kind of gap, about half a second. Hopefully for Blade he can catch and pass Paula to try and bolster his position in the championship. As we see, the fight up front between Newbie and Dipping does seem to have stagnated a little bit, as Dipping seems to be finding their feet in the new tires.
Yeah, perhaps you'd imagine maybe not so much a struggle on the BMW's end, but perhaps the Lexus starting to find its feet a little bit better in terms of, and maybe in an adjustment, but worth noting that speed advantage that Dipping Sauce has, well, the speed traps are saying Newbies now had a new speed trap of a 244, so 1K advantage. Obviously, with a little bit of straight slipstream there to help that straight line, but very, very interesting coming in from Newbie to close that gap, as they are now on a straight battle for that P2 position, and Newbie certainly not going to be letting that go, or that P2 position go unspoken for. So we're going to have to keep eyes on that, as Blade is starting to really put pressure on Paula Brady going into the Dunlop hairpin as we rock up that Schumacher S, that gap flickering just between 6 and 5/10, and maybe just trying to get the compliance. It looks like Blade might have had the better run through there. Paula getting a little bit of understeer, and maybe half a look coming into the inside of 10, but Paula, all the Ys are keeping it around the outside there as we jump on board with Blade Wolf. Coming through 11, just trying to put it through. A little bit of an oversteer moment, struggling with traction, coming through 11 on the straight now, tipping it through 13. Not really a corner as we set ourselves up for the chicane. It's going to be hard on the brakes in between the 100 and the 50, about 75 meters. Tip it in all the first curb. Paula with a little bit of understeer, able to keep it in, just absolutely munch those curbs. That Mercedes eating the VTOL chicane that we've seen so many other cars be absolutely thrown offline by. That Mercedes, very, very compliant, much like it was in 1.8 over the big bumps, and that's gonna be quite an advantage for the LPR driver. As we tip it into turn 1, though, maybe struggling a little under braking as we see Blade Wolf gain quite a bit of time into one. That Aston Martin just too far back to make a move work.
Yep, and see Blade has a little bit more downforce than the Mercedes by the looks of it. Nice and strong on the brakes compared to it, and a little bit tighter in the corners. As we see, just following here through the puddles. Not too much. Paul have a good exit there, and heading down towards the, I can't remember what they call this corner. I don't think it has a name actually. I think it's the one after. It's called the Ford curve. I think this one's nameless. But yeah, it seems to be kind of to and fro at the moment. Blade a little bit better on the brakes.
Maybe we can sneak them a sponsorship in, since they seem to have a habit of naming those turns.
Yes. We'll call it Simufur corner.
Exactly. Just turn 5 for right now. It's going to be a little bit far removed from there as we head into Dunlop. But it looks like the Aston just kind of holding its own. That gap, once again, sitting about 5/6 as we head up the Schumacher S's. And that Mercedes just trying to tip it in. Maybe struggling with the front end, but a little bit of understeer as we see that Aston going a tiny bit wide. But able to hold the momentum as we see that gap close up. And once again, coming into turn 10, the momentum is in favor of Blade Wolf, but not close enough to send a move. Paula holding strong in that Mercedes, not budging for any of these half moves that Blade is sending and trying to get them to just move offline. And once again, we move on to the straight, and the Aston is just not close enough to make a move coming into the chicane.
Yep, it seems like Paula maybe caught a little bit of the gravel there coming out of the S's, and gave Blade a little bit of a run, but just can't do anything under the brakes just yet.
Not at all, and Blade just having to bide his time as we roll through the final corner Coca-Cola curve. As we run onto the straight once more, it looks like maybe a little bit of a better run for the Aston Martin, but I again don't think they're gonna be close enough. We know how much stronger they are in turn one, as Paul may be a little bit defensive, but yeah, also a little deep. And that's going to be Blade able to come right up under the rear of the LPR driver. And this could be that move that we saw in turn 3-4 if they're able to get close enough. But no, the Aston just a little bit wide under braking, but the Mercedes struggling for traction. And here's that move we just talked about coming into 4. Now the run to 5 and oversteered. Oh, Blade taking a hard hit and hard into the wall. That's very... Oh, and no, the rejoin with Suzuka trying to avoid and very well held to try to keep that on track, but Blade Wolf hard into the wall and almost a harder contact with the number 10, and I believe randomly not putting pressure, but I want to take another look at that. I think Paula just catching a snap of oversteer, and Blade doesn't look like they have a ton of damage on the front end of that Aston, but my oh my, that was a hard hit coming out of turn 4. As we jump in, Paul, our camera's going a little bit crazy.
Just gets a little bit onto the AstroTurf and just puts it a little bit oversteer into the car, and that of course then ricochets into Blade. Unfortunate, maybe a bit of a racing incident there, but we'll see what happens with the protests after the race.
I mean, a very unfortunate incident. It looks like Blade only losing one position, but unfortunately losing that battle to Paul. I'd have to be inclined to agree, though. It looked like a bit of a racing incident. Just Blade was starting to push all the ways out to give that just one car length or cars with the space to Paula and really get that run out. And Paula just wide on that wet line, that wet painted concrete on the outside, and just unfortunate, really, kind of a faultless incident, but it is what it is. Blade able to keep it going, and scary rejoin, not too keen to see that, but nothing really came of it with Suzuki able to make avoiding action. So now Blade's starting to put pressure onto the Paliku'i driver. Just keep it in tune.
As we see, Blade does indeed, it throws it around the outside, just coming out of the Mercedes arena, and does indeed get that pass put on Suzuka. So coming into the Mercedes arena, that's a different corner. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be affecting him too much, thankfully. Doesn't seem to have incurred too much damage on that Aston. As we see then, let me just have a look. Not too much happening. Aura's closing into the back of Radomi, actually. As we see, newbie Nick has indeed caught Dipping Sauce after a little bit of a stagnation between that battle between those two. Dipping did get I think it was about 1.5 seconds ahead at one point, but newbie does seem to have caught that back up, so maybe a little bit of an issue there for Dipping Sauce, either a mistake or the tires are starting to go away a bit. But yeah, this seems to be continuing on. This looks like newbie does have a little bit better traction coming out of the corner. Looks like maybe Dipping Sauce trying to find a bit of water there for those tires. Maybe we are indeed getting a little bit of a dry line and those tires are starting to overheat. Could be a possibility. That's down to turn 1. A little bit deep for Dipping Sauce, but nothing happening there really. Yep, not too much happening. Just good battling all around as they try. Oh, maybe a little bit deep.
Yeah, line of stern coming in from the P2 battle, but yeah, the puddle hunting that we're seeing from the Lexus, you're right. I'd have to imagine that perhaps maybe a little bit too big of an adjustment as we see how much more grip Newbie has under those tires, underneath them with those tires. That BMW looking so much more compliant. The Lexus probably just too big of an adjustment, assuming that the weather wasn't going to fall off as much. Maybe not getting the right pressures, but still holding the track position. We know how strong that Lexus is in the straight, so it is going to have to be quite a daring move from the number 17 here. And we've seen how hard it has been to pass, but it looks like maybe a little bit of an understeer. This could be a moment into turn 10. Newbie taking half a look, just trying to get dipping to go defensive, but filing back in. And once again, as we tip it into 11, Newbie going deep into 11 on the inside line and not able to get in line. But this is the straightaway of the Lexus starts to open up, so Newbie needed to file him back in. But we saw Newbie once earlier in this race make a move around the outside of the chicane and how much stronger it was. But no, we have replays wanting to come in. Lance Stroll wanting to make an appearance, but Newbie able to maybe losing a little bit of time as Dipping gets it all over the curbs, but deep into the final corner and able to keep it back in and get it back on track, carry that momentum through. But all that time that they just gained, Newbie able to pull that back, and this could be going down to the final minutes. We have 3 minutes left, so I'd take it maybe 2 to 3 laps to go, depending where we are at. I believe 2 laps to go. So this is going to be now or never for Newbie. It's got to be now or next lap, and we don't have a lot of time left to go. And that Lexus is all over the place. Just look at it wiggle. And deep into 3. This is going to be side-by-side. Newbie needing to make a move now. That Lexus struggling.
Over under.
As 17 able to get alongside as we run into turn 5, as then Newbie's going to be looking to hang it around the outside, and the Lexus finally just having to concede. But number 17 going deep as we roll through the Ford curve. The Lexus starting to drive alongside, trying to put that power down, and that straight line advantage could push it towards Dunlop, but I think Newbie just able to get the power down a little bit better, and that's finally the B2 that Newbie's been fighting for all race long, to see if Dip has anything to say about it. But those tires, I think, finally giving way.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe Newbie didn't really want to push the issue too much, but it looked like he was dying to get that P2 back and bolster his championship chances, as Dipping Sauce goes a little bit wide through the Mercedes arena, and that gives Newbie all the invitation he needs to get that P2.
Yeah, I mean, Newbie had been sitting behind Dipping for quite a while, so you have to imagine the moment that they got any open door that they were going to go sprinting through it. As we see Suzuka now following Blade Wolf, who I believe is snuck past while we were looking at that battle for P2. And we are getting a notification that we are on the final lap here, so all these drivers get one more tour. So this is going to be now or never for this battle for P10. Randomly starting to put pressure on to Suzuka, and it is going to reach a boiling point. A little bit deep, that curb pushing Randomly a little bit wide there, but also Suzuka catching up to Blade, who went a little bit deep as well. Defensive into turn 10. Suzuka trying to get it around the outside, but a little bit less grip around that outer ring of the corner, and Blade able to hang on, and Suzuka now just needing to slot back in. But that's brought Randomly back into the battle here, as all the gaps are shrinking into those final lap of the race. So we're going to be looking very closely as maybe Suzuka trying to get a little bit of a dive going through the chicane, as we saw Randomly going a little bit deep as well. But I think everyone just being a little bit cautious, trying to set up this final corner one last time for the last run of the straightaway for them, and it's going to be, I think, too far for anyone to make a dive here. So we also see up in P5, Deeds might be possibly putting on a challenge for P4, so Luna is going to be leading this, and once again we're seeing Deeds to the final breath of the race, taking a battle to the end. I believe Deeds was in front, so possibly a mistake that Deeds is going to be trying to fight and get back here. and Luna just putting the traction of that Porsche to work, able to get the run out. But I think that Ferrari is going to be stretching its legs just a little bit more through the Schumacher S's, both cars looking equally compliant, but I think Luna getting a little bit worse of a run rolling through is maybe half a dive, but this driver and the other Porsche leading through the final corner, trying to make a run down the straight in that final attempt is going to give them the win. So Wushel with their first win in the Simufur AM Championship in round 3. The Porsche absolutely dominant going through, followed up by these two in P4 and 5, going to the absolute dying breath of the race as D's getting right underneath the rear wing of that Porsche. Could we see half a dive into the final corner, setting up the run? Luna needing to just hold it together, and they're able to hang on to that P4. So very, very strong defense from Luna as we have to jump back down the order as well for the battle down in P9. This could be any mistake, could be any of these drivers dropping far out of the top 10. Blade Wolf maybe stretching their legs just a little bit more, but maybe I think a little too far. One last tour through the VTOL chicane, and I think you just avoid those curves, just keep it alive. Blade making it through Suzuka, Ranami, and then followed by Oraz. So I think this is where we will be finishing as deep goes Ranami. That could open the door, but no, just a little bit too far for Oraz to try to take advantage of that. So these drivers finishing up in Blade Wolf, Suzuka, Ranami, and then Oraz line of stern. So all the way to the dying breath of the race. Once again, just like Suzuka, these drivers putting on a great show. And Captain Consistent and Newbie finishing P2 with the trifecta of P2s as we see Skyler sneak past the line in P13. And then I believe just one more driver, the Ultimate Punting Machine, MNU, finishing up that order. But Wushel taking a dominant victory as we've seen so far. Dominant wins from every one of our races, but no lack of entertainment down the order as a Newbie, once again, 3 P2s for our championship leader once again, and dipping sauce, putting that Lexus into a well-fought P3, but the tires just falling off a little bit too much for them. But man, once again, the drivers just putting on another beautiful race. The conditions that I would have expected to, if anything, stir up chaos from the conditions, but no, it was very well put together from all of our drivers.
Yeah, it seemed like it was just kind of went like a dry race, didn't it? It didn't really, the rain didn't really affect them too much, apart from maybe the odd spin here or there. But we get them in dry races as well. So yeah, the weather not playing as much as a part as we probably would have hoped in this race. But yeah, congratulations to Wushel, takes her home her first win of the Silver Championship. Newbie going for the championship win with only second places by the looks of it as we get halfway through this championship. 3 more races to go. Will he end up getting the win he wants?
You'd have to imagine he's putting in a strong case for this championship challenge. I believe 66 points provisionally now will be quite a lead. I believe they'll be stretching almost to 10 points, I believe, with that victory. I'd have to run the numbers really, really quick. But I believe they'll be at 66 points. It'll be a 7-point lead as Wushel will move up to 59, I believe, with this race. So, and I have to imagine that's their closest challenge. I don't think Denek will get as much of a points haul here. So, Newbie with quite a strong lead. Of course, anything can happen. We saw all 3 of our championship contenders outside of Newbie having a bit of a chaotic race. Anka, Kestro, and Denek all dropping quite a few positions from where we would have normally seen them. So, all it takes is one event. Newbie proving that consistency is king so far, but you'd also have to imagine, when's that win coming? Because it has been all 3 races that we've seen that BMW in P2.
Yeah, I think as well, Wushel showing that you don't really need to be there all the time. Just you need to be there once, and you're right back in it again with P2 in the championship provisionally, with that P1 in this race, and kind of I think it was like P3, P4 maybe in one of the other races, and then first race, I think, kind of towards it's the bottom end of the top 10. So yeah, just goes to show you, you need one good race and you're back in the fight.
Certainly, I think they benefited from the late race accidents at Suzuka sneaking up there. And then I believe Donington, they were in P7 or P8. I wanted to say they were struggling on that first showing, trying to get the Porsche working. But seems it was working today without any issue, as there was, didn't see much of them, but they were absolutely dominant in that race up front, and leading by 20 seconds. So once again, another very strong drive from our race winner. As we take ourselves through the top 10, Newbie filing out that P2, dipping in 3. Luna taking P4, then followed up by Deeds in P5, as we saw that battle go to the very end. Denak and Sergel taking 6th and 7th, followed up by Paula in 8th, and we saw all those drivers fighting for the majority of the middle portion of the race. Then the second pack that we saw, Blade Wolf in P9, followed up quickly by Suzuka and filing out that top 10. Right, just missing out on that P10 spot, that's sitting in P11, or as unable to benefit from that final corner mistake, as we jumped in with Skylar, who finished P13, then MNU, who was the last to cross the line, and P14, of course, our retirements in Anka, Kestrel, and then a DNS from Nate, who maybe a little bit of rain check, if you might say, might be correct for the conditions. So unfortunate to see that they weren't able to make the start of the race, but hopefully we'll see them in future weeks and maybe put on a challenge for the win in that Lamborghini, the sole Lamborghini of the field.
Yep. As with next week, we return to the UK as we head towards Oulton Park. That's going to be a really interesting race. I think the forecast is rain again, but it's a really tight racetrack. It's really hard to overtake on. And maybe we'll see even more chaos than this time around.
Most certainly so, and I'd expect the Porsches to be quite strong around Oulton Park as well. The rest of our calendar as well, looking at Valencia, as I learned to speak, in Skoda, finishing out the championship. So we will be looking at quite a strong challenge for some of these higher downforce cars later on in the championship. Might see the Mercedes squeak in there as well. We saw how strong it could be here in the rain, so we might see it sneak up in Oulton Park, typically a track that I wouldn't expect it to be strong, but I think things have changed in 1.9, and we have also seen the ebb and flow from track to track has been quite on it. So looking forward to the next rounds of the championship. We have 3 more races to go as we just crossed the midway point. Newbie, once again, your championship leader, but if you wish to join us, please check out our socials and also our Discord in the description below. You feel free to join us. We run championships all year long, ACC, iRacing, and even other sims occasionally here and there. We would love to have you. If you want to just keep up with our action, our Twitter is well down in the description. Feel free to follow. But that has been us for our Simufur Silver Champ Round 3 broadcast. My name is Plasma. Thank you for coming, and I am signing off.
Yep, and if you're in the UK, enjoy your bank holiday weekend. And if you're not in the UK, enjoy your week at work. I've been FezzFox. I'll see you next week.